So I was on a solutions review panel yesterday and I got a ton of questions about what is the future of autonomous workforce. And we talk about that a lot on here, the robot stealing your job type of mentality. So I thought I'd give you an example of how that's actually being activated in the manufacturing industry so you can get an idea of what that looks like. So there's this concept of dark manufacturing. It's not even a concept, it's actually a full-blown initiative and strategy. We also call it lights out manufacturing. So it's these fully automated production facilities that have no human presence whatsoever. I'm talking, they don't even have lights on. They don't need to have lights, climate control, compliance and regulation systems for safety, many of the infrastructure that you need for a human workforce. If you do any work in the Chinese marketplace, these are very prevalent. We are talking 24/7 operations, no breaks in shifts, no holidays, no downtime. All of the cost efficiencies of having a workforce that runs 24/7 without any of the expenses of human labor. Obviously, it requires a heavy and sophisticated RPA strategy, robots, automation, AI, quality control, and all of that is monitored by remote engineers that are actually human. An example of this would be Xiaomi's smartphone factory in China, where they can produce one smartphone every single minute. So what we were debating on this panel is this the future or is this a problem? And don't get me wrong, there's lots of benefits to this type of manufacturing. You have lower operation costs, you have less downtime. Obviously, robots don't need sleep, they don't need breaks, they don't need to eat. You have higher quality control and more precision. And once it's set up in one global factory, it's very easy enough, right, to scale to other areas of the world. But a lot of people see many drawbacks to this. If you take the Xiaomi example and you think about Changping and the drop in the overall economy there because of the loss of human workers. It's not just one factory. It trickles down into all of the macro and microeconomics of a local and global economy. You also are a huge risk for cyber threats. The more connected your business, the more openings for threats. And with a business that's all built around technology, it can shut down the entire production for a certain amount of time. A lot of times we see this in ransomware attacks where they're demanding a certain amount of money that you have to pay these very sophisticated global hacker organizations to get your business actually back to production. With no human intervention whatsoever, there's very little you can do when they hijack your technology. If you've worked in heavy RPA or automation before, the thing I struggle with the most is there's no universe where something doesn't break or there isn't some variance that's stopping production unless you've gone through an extensive amount of testing. But I would even argue that that is not possible. So having no human oversight, who's accountable when the quality slips or production fails in some way? And not to mention the governmental policies and regulations. Obviously, the world economy is not catching up to these types of regulations. And there's so many questions around that. If you have a production facility that has no people, do you pay taxes? Is there a robot tax? And what is that shared prosperity if there's no understanding of what that compliance looks like? We also have a lack as a global community and really any sort of government. I would say Europe is probably the forefront of this, but definitely not here in the States, of any sort of AI accountability law. So if I have a dark factory or a lights off manufacturing production facility and my robots produce a defect in something like a car or a medical device, who is actually liable for that? If it doesn't work for the customer, the car crashes, who's responsible for that? And that's very hard to define when you have only autonomous technology making your equipment. So the question on the panel, I think, is irrelevant, right? Because these dark factories, they're already here. This is not a future initiative. The question is, how do we as technology leaders build them with intention? As a global society, will we allow technology to outpace policy and for profit to go over people? Because we've all seen how that works and it isn't a good look. So as software engineers or AI engineers, I think we really need to ask ourselves, are we designing the system or are we part of the system?